Well, hello everyone, and welcome to a new edition of the Bondex weekly live stream. We have the honor this week of having Piers Ridyard join us today from Radix DLT. He's a Y Combinator alumni and blockchain serial entrepreneur, and we're very excited to have him this week. I'm gonna start off by letting him kind of give us an introduction about his company, what they do, what's special about them. I'll go over Bondex a little bit, and then there's a few subjects that I want to touch with him in regards to DeFi, what they're working on, what's ahead in the whole space. So, Piers,
Cool.
with that, I'll leave it to you to make an introduction.
Absolutely. So I'm Piers Ridyard. I'm the CEO of Radix DLT, and
We are running into some technical problems. Wait, you're
yeah,
back.
I'm back. I'll give it another go. But I am currently traveling, so anyone watching and being like, "Why is the internet shit?" It's because I'm traveling. I'm sorry. So yeah, Radix is a public ledger entirely focused on decentralized finance, or DeFi for short. We're a decentralized ledger like Ethereum or Bitcoin. But we do two things really well. The first is we are massively scalable, specifically for DeFi applications, which is a big problem in Ethereum at the moment, and is going to be a big problem on other ledgers as well. And then we've spent the last 18 months working closely with DeFi projects and DeFi builders to build a new programming language to make it really super easy to build decentralized finance applications and take things like Uniswap from like 10,000 lines of code to like 150 lines of code.
Fantastic. We'll be talking about the programming language because we're in our building stage. And to give you more context, I don't know what you know about Bondex, but we're essentially a Web 3.0 professional network. We're going to be taking on the Web 2.0 and legacy platforms of the past that kind of monopolize professional data and keep all the value to themselves. And we're going to democratize that to give economic power to the users and the talent that bring value to that professional network. And we're going to have a lot of ancillary services, including fintech and DeFi integrated into that professional network, right? So the idea is that, if you look at the talent platforms of today, they're one of the least engaged user bases in the world. There's not much stickiness because the user doesn't have much reason to be on a talent platform except when he needs a job, which if it's permanent, workforce, it shouldn't be more than once every 2 years unless something is wrong with you or unless you're in the gig economy, which it's a different ball game. But essentially we're trying to change that by incentivizing the users in the network to own a piece of it, keep their data fresh, validate their skills, and we believe that that's going to lead to a much more engaged user base, which will lead to employers and people looking for talent to have a much more streamlined, talent acquisition process that's going to be cheaper and faster. So that's sort of the overall Bondex premise. With that said, we're building our digital wallet now, and I'd love to hear more about your new programming language and how that's going to be easier to do. But there's a few more things that I looked through your website and I was interested in. It seems like you have a lot of products. You also have a desktop and hardware wallet, which I imagine are connected together, or is that
So no,
correct?
we don't have our own hardware wallet. We integrate with the Ledger Nano X, and the desktop wallet is essentially, and it's an open source wallet implementation of because Radix Public Ledger is its own network, right? So when you have your own public ledger, you have to create all of the tools that you would expect people to be able to interface with it. And what you just expect is an ability to hold tokens, an ability to if you're interested in building wallets on Radix, here's an implementation of the wallet itself. The Ledger X is obviously I think it is the top selling hardware wallet in the world, built by Ledger, which is the biggest hardware wallet manufacturer in the world. And we integrated that universally accepted sort of standard for secure crypto, because we've just 1.5 $1.5 billion value on top of the Radix network, $1.5 billion of XRD securing the network. So when you're dealing with large,
congratulations.
yeah, it's a great milestone. But like when you're dealing with that kind of value, people who own tokens and who are staking want reliable ways to secure those tokens, and hardware wallets are the best way of doing that. So that's why we support Ledger.
I think that's a fantastic combination and the most secure way to approach it. And you know, it's more and more paramount. I see it on your website. The amount of hacking that takes place in DeFi is not okay. But I actually want to backtrack a little bit. I'm talking about the heart of the, you know, how problematic the programming languages and difficulty it brings to developers that want to code on DeFi. And I want to hear from you. Why is it so difficult? Why is it a specific language or a specific industry or space in which developers have additional trouble to developing on it?
Yeah, there's two principles here. The first is that Solidity, which is the main programming language that people build smart contracts in, is derived from, inspired by JavaScript, because when Ethereum was first created and Ethereum Solidity, they didn't know really what the language was going to be used for. They didn't really know what smart contracts were used for. Now it's clear that the principal application of smart contracts is dealing with programmatic finance, money. But they didn't know that it was going to be dealing with money. But if you went to any like fintech startup and said, hey, I'd like you to build your core technology in JavaScript, please, they kind of would look at you like you were insane. And so Solidity started from a really bad starting in the first place if you wanted to create secure applications. And so a lot of things that come from Solidity do actually come from that the syntax works in the language. But the more deeper problem is the way that ledgers understand what assets are. So back in the 1980s and 1990s, when the game industry was just getting started, game developers, before they could start building, they had to define what the world was. They had to define how physics works, because you couldn't build a game until the game understood how objects interacted with each other, whether or not something was bouncy, whether or not something was solid or not solid, like how water worked and all this kind of stuff. Was it like hugely difficult? And it was about 90% of the work was just building that before you could actually build the game and the narrative and the story and the character development. And then in 1998, a game changer came along, which was the first real game engine. And what the game engine did is it said to developers, hey, you don't have to worry about physics anymore. We just give you physics, and now you can think about building the game. And that was the start of the game industry basically becoming the biggest entertainment industry in the world. It's bigger than film, TV, and music combined. And so underneath Scripto, which is our programming language, we've added this concept of a game engine for finance. And so when in Ethereum Solidity, what you have to do, and actually in any of the programming, any of the platforms that have smart contracts, so Avalon, you name it, the platforms themselves don't understand what an asset is. So if I a token on Ethereum, I'm not just declaring a token. The network doesn't know what a token is. What I do is I create a program that defines what a token is, and inside that it keeps the balances and it has all of the things that adhere to standard ERC20. So every single token is its own little program and its own little balance. And the way that DeFi works is by sending messages between these little programs. So you can have a little program that's defining part of the LP shares and pools of an automatic market maker, part of it that is defining the contour swap, and then another. And it becomes very, very complicated, because you're not going, oh, I have these objects that I'm passing around. You have these things that are little programs that are controlling their discrete objects, and it becomes really complicated. And on Radix, we just go, oh, no, let's just make the primitives of finance native quality of the ledger. So on Radix, what that is, because the game engine already understands the financial primitives. If you say, I want to swap this token for that token, again, you don't have to write all of this massive amounts of code. It's a single line or a couple of code, because again, the primitives of finance are just inherently of the ledger. So you get script syntax makes sense for building finance your applications. And the second is just huge amounts of code is rendered completely unnecessary. The ledger itself understands what finance is and what financial primitives are. So you go
nothing worse
from, as I say, 10,000 lines of Uniswap solidity to 150 lines.
So nothing worse than overbuilding and actually overbearing your developers who already have so much work with extra code they have to write that ends up being useless. I'm sold. Right. We're gonna have to take the conversation offline later on about how to train our team to maybe switch the coding language that we use. But I find this super interesting. What we've seen in the world, and especially with blockchain now, has blown it up around more. Is over the last decade, in terms of talent and the talent market, we've seen the rise of the developer, right? There's only 25 million individuals around the world that develop software for a living. That is an infinitely minimal number compared to the amount of software that needs to be built for an increasingly digitized economy that keeps, expanding and getting digitized exponentially. So anything that builds, gives value to those developers, including a new language that makes a category which is now blowing up more valuable, is simply a fantastic idea. And I congratulate you for thinking of that and making it happen. My question would be, what resources are you offering people to learn your language, onboard it, or come, turn to the Radix language? And second question is, if I'm an investor, is there a way for me to have upside in the adoption of that language?
Interesting question. So the first is like, the language it was only previewed on Friday last week, and we are releasing that. We're fully insourcing it at the end of this year, and sort of next year we'll be looking much more to like ecosystem building and community build. But what really matters in getting a language introduced is making sure that you're not incentivizing the behaviors. Like what crypto often does is throw money at a problem, and you can end up creating an ecosystem that's essentially soulless, like isn't there because they're trying to build things there because they want the money. And so if you get your incentivization system wrong early, you can end up really messing yourself out. So like our first thing is really going to be focusing on building a great core of like passion who believe that we do, that there is a much better way of building these applications, and see that once they get the hang of these tools, they suddenly have an opportunity to build much better decentralized finance applications that are a lot more cost effective, a lot easier to maintain, and can support a huge amount more complexity. Like this analogy between before the game engine and after the game engine doesn't get less complex, they got way more complicated and way more immersive. And that's what we think is going to happen with finance, and how DeFi is going to be the world of finance. But to do that, you have to start with a core community who isn't there to pay them to build what you created, and that's the starting point for us. In terms of like how they can get a return from this, like Radix is a utility token. It's a public ledger, the fees of the network, and if you want to deploy applications or tokens on top of it, you can. Like we don't really speculate on whether or not the value is going to go up or down.
Okay, understood. That's fantastic, and that's a very interesting and a great opener into another topic that is actually closely related to Bondex. So what blockchain does and Web 3.0 does, right, and DeFi is capable of, is programming money into being a much more smart, asset than what we, fiat and the money of the past, right? And you've hit on the nail. I'm a believer that the economy works based on individual personal financial incentives, and the collection of all of those, you have the overall economy, right? And now we're able to design smart systems, right, through incentivized blockchain systems that, as you say, are going to create or have the potential to create the wrong or the right communities, right? So we launched our mobile mining wallet in August, and we've just crossed this week 250,000 users. the MVP product of Bondex, which is somewhere where you can, you can build your professional profile, upload your resume, invite other users, and then mine rewards of the token that will eventually, have value. And what we're working on now with the money we've raised is exactly what you're saying. Now we want to target certain demographics and build a real community. And for example, the goal, one of the ways we're thinking about this is we want to make sure the people that invest in our pre-sale and stuff like that, they have origin accounts. They're users. Our users or our investors are our community, and that's how you build a strong bond, and not some unsustainable pump and dump, kind of cowboys and Indians, what you see in the crypto space nowadays, which I think it's special part of what you're saying. The wrong incentives get built early in a lot of projects, giving out free money without asking anything in exchange. For example, I see a lot of NFTs now that I think 6 months from now, they're going to be regarded as, meme coins were after the first hype, right? So for example, we want to implement NFTs with a POAP, like proof of participation. We want to extract,
sure.
We want to see users do things in our network to earn what they get. And that's how you get the true believers, right? We have 250,000 users, but as long as I get 50,000 true believers, then I have a community, then I have a network, then I have a company, then I have a great project. And I think what you said is just, it's just very important, right? Building the right incentivized systems. But listen,
yeah, I mean,
enough from Bondex. There's two other things that Go ahead.
There's a really interesting human trait that if people get given something without having pay, is often this feeling of that not being valuable itself, because in many ways, like people value things that are difficult to obtain. And that's partly related with how we think of status. Part of how societal status is how accepted things are. And then in the crypto, we kind of we sometimes go the opposite way, and we give away large amounts of things, and we're like, by giving this away, it's going to become valuable. And I often think that is a really, it's very seldom that works in the way that people expect it to. I think what's happening now with sort of airdrops that happen. You used Uniswap for a period of time and were one of our first users and adopters. Here's tokens. Not going, use Uniswap and we'll give you tokens. It's like going, oh, you've done something valuable, now we'll give you some tokens later, but we didn't promise you that up front. That wasn't part of the contract that we sort of said with you up front. So I'm really interested, when you download the app, the 250,000 users you guys have, what are they actually doing?
So again, our approach is a supply side disruption of the professional network, right? So we're giving that this blockchain incentives or generated network effects, right? So when you download the app today, it's got limited functionalities, basically 3 things, right? You download it, you register, and then you do things to boost your mining rate, which include uploading your resume, building a professional profile, adding a short video pitch of yourself that talks about kind of like your skills and your background. And then you invite other users to the network. And those are basically the main things that the app does. We're in the process of building a job portal to kind of have the demand side of the job marketplace, right? Now we have the supply. Now we want to see, we have some people lined up, some beta clients lined up on the demand side to go look for their workforce and talent there, right? We're undergoing a historic period of labor shortage. So we believe that, again, the idea is to increase the utility and functionality of our app to make this
historic shortage of labor, historic labor shortage in developers.
Well, developers is the biggest skills gap in the world, but knowledge workers in general are having a historic labor shortage, and they're harder to get in prime markets. There's been this COVID has accelerated distributed work and the way we work by 10 years, but the current platforms that we have today to find, manage talent, etc., they haven't been able to adapt that fast, right? That's why we believe now is the perfect time for a Web 3.0 alternative, something that caters more to that, hypermobile workforce that might be more flexible and distributed.
That's really interesting. I had no idea. I would have intuitively, I would have expected that a massive systemic issue that caused a large number of people to lose their jobs as a result of COVID would mean that there wasn't a labor shortage.
You know what's funny? It's not only a shave or large, they're calling it the Great Resignation. There's never been so many people resigning their jobs. It seems like people had a lot of time during COVID to reflect on their life. And I think a lot of them realized that they hated their jobs and therefore looked for alternatives, looked for new jobs. And a lot of people resigned their jobs. People are trying to resign their jobs. And there's also great inflation and salaries are going up. So, you know, a developer now is actually costing more than ever before. You know, if I was in college back again, instead of, you know, I started in banking, if I was going to do finance, I'd be like, that's not what you should be doing. You should be learning how to code and become a coder. And the skills gap for developers is so high that, you know, new colleges and new coding schools, they will never be able to catch up to the demand. So that even this, as supply increases, you know, incrementally through those resources, it's not going to catch up to demand. So if you're a coder, you're always going to have a high paying job for that foreseeable future. So, you know, that's for out there, whoever's listening here. If you're still in school,
go learn to code.
Take that.
I mean, like, not even if you're still in school, man. If you're interested and excited, like if problem solving excites you and you enjoy a bit of maths, then like I know people. We've had people who only started coding, you know, in their late 20s to learn for sure.
I like that message for Piers. He's exactly right. I don't know why I constrain that demographic. Anyone out there could pick up a book, could join a course, Coursera, you know, HackerRank, whatever you want to do. Grab that resource, put the time in, learn how to code, and hey, jumpstart your career in a new path. That's actually it's the most profitable area to be in the world and right now.
And come build DeFi, which is where, you know, two guys in a dorm room can end up like having $1 billion under management in 2 months. Like DeFi is literally is the current technology gold rush. And if you want to get into that, then go learn crypto, because that's the best way of getting into it.
We're completely aligned with that. You know, DeFi is the future. And you know, one thing I want to touch with you, which I'm sure you're very well versed on, is what is your view on the regulation that's coming? Do you think that's going to clip the wings of that? You know, crypto has been maybe the greatest wealth creation event I've ever seen, or my generation has ever been a witness of.
Biggest wealth transfer event since the birth of the internet, for sure. Right. But like, I think we're just getting started. Like like the global financial system is $400 trillion. DeFi is around $200 billion. There's about 2,000 times growth available there, and we're talking about reinvent something that fundamentally ends the global economy. Yeah, this is the greatest opportunity that one before us has ever seen, just because of the opportunity that's represented by reinventing money. But like regulation is an interesting one. I think that the regulator is very much in between a rock and a hard place here. Like, on one hand, they want to prevent investor harm, and they want to prevent consumer harm, but on the other hand, they want to benefit. And what DeFi does, and what public decentralized ledgers do, is they massively decrease the cost of providing financial services. They massively increase end state versus the current institutional frameworks, where it takes millions and millions of dollars to create a new institution, a new bank, or a new brokerage, or whatever. You should end up in a situation where you have more competition, which is fundamentally good for consumer choice. And in terms of what you can get in DeFi, you know, 10% APY on USDC from a yield that's actually from a pretty legitimate source is just completely unheard of in the world that we currently have, where there's an entire yield famine for consumers in their banking solutions. So regulators are kind of in this situation where they're like, in some ways this is great for consumers, and in other ways there's opportunity for consumer harm, for people to get misled, for people to get missold things. So they're struggling. I think that we're going to see like we're going to see some regulation coming in, but the regulator, I don't know if the regulators are going to take a heavy hand in it or not. I think there's now a lot of there's a lot of extra stuff that's happening as well, where like crypto people have, like, there's some really interesting ground. We like, one of the things that Radix did is we were like, fundamentally what we want is choice for builders on top of our platform, and we want to make sure that choice always remains for the startup entrepreneur to just get started on a platform regardless of what the regulations are. So one of the things that we built was something called Instapass, which is this single sign-on KYC AML solution for users and for DeFi applications that they can choose to integrate into their DeFi application, so that, you know, if there is some regulation that comes in for your particular DeFi application where you still want to be able to get customers and be able to provide these services, we have optional extra
what is it called?
it's called Instapass, instapass.io. And this is there this is there because we want to maintain the low barrier to entry for anyone to be able to come in and go, oh, I don't need to create an entire legal department just to be able to test my product idea. And I think that's the biggest risk, is that the regulation comes in and it increases the barrier to entry, and means that you need to have raised, you know, a few $1 million instead of a few $100,000 of seed capital just to give something. And the less experiments that happen in the market, the less choice that consumers are going to have, and the less opportunity people are going to have for their capital to grow. Like, what we're kind of going, we don't know what the future is going to hold. We want decentralized finance, permissionless finance to be something that people can always choose to build. Because if in their jurisdiction they have to go, well, we have to comply with local regulatory law. We're a bit worried if we don't. Then we also have built these extra optional services to help ensure that barrier to entry stays as low as possible.
Completely aligned there. I'm going to be checking your product out, because that's something that we will need once we're building the wallet and the fintech side of the platform. I think we're using Passbase at the moment, but, you know, I'm going to look at your product. It's probably a competitor, but it seems, you know, I already think you're thinking about things in a really smart way. So we're going to be checking you out for that.
I'm surprised it's a competitor, because every single other platform I've checked doesn't stand as a reliable source, doesn't do the AML KYC checks and then certify that person has checked. So then say, we've done an identity check, it's up to you to decide whether or not this is good or not, and then you still need a compliance officer to go through it. What we've done is we've done the extra step. We've said, we're going to create something you can rely on.
Well,
you can rely on.
That's great to know. Thank you for that.
It's huge. It's huge.
That's a tiny, massive detail that I'll be definitely looking into, and I'm gonna be I'll be looking at your product and getting our tech team on it, you know, ASAP. So that brings me one thing that you said, and one thing that you said that interests me is like, okay, the whole financial system's 400 trillion. We're at 200 billion now. That means there's a 200x opportunity, but that means that
2,000.
2,000 growth available opportunity. But that means there's gonna have to be a bridge between us, meaning the crypto natives, early adopters, blockchain warriors, and the financial institutions of the past, like the one I used to work with when I first started out. And I've seen that you've done some projects and products for the IBMs, Visas, UBSs of the world. So how do you see that transition? Do you think the current financial institutions will roll out their own products? Do you think they will go to the people with the know-how to build that infrastructure for them? Or, you know, how do you see this playing out? For, you know, I would know.
Yeah, so my opinion has changed massively over the years, right? Like, I started out as a private public blockchain, like both are possible. Like there's gonna be hybrid systems, and now I am fully a public decentralized ledger maximalist. From the point of view of a public decentralized ledger allows you to create a single integrated fabric for anyone to come and build on. They don't need permission to do so. However, it doesn't, and that's the safest possible place you can have money. It's super national, it's outside of the direct influence or control of governments or corporates. It can survive any given company, or even sufficiently decentralized and sufficiently resilient. Like, why would we not want that as the starting point for any infrastructure that we want to hold value on, right? So decentralized public infrastructure makes so much more sense than trusting a consortium of banks or something like that. The next step above that is, well, you have this ability to be completely expressive on top of these public ledgers by creating smart contracts using something like Scripto or something like Solidity. And that with that complete expressiveness, there's no reason that you can't have sort of permissioned and semi-permissioned environments or sets of like applications that work together. So I do see that there's potentially going to be like some of public ledgers where you'll have institutional players and you'll have to be an institution to get into it, but that will be then composable or cross liquidity sharing with, you know, permissionless systems, and there will be ways in which you can move seamlessly between it. And the reason that's important, because these digital object environments, and they can do it instantaneously. So the benefit that comes from being able to instantly move capital from opportunity to opportunity is going to be far outweighed by having that single fabric than like having private ledger integration. What would be much better is if you built your own applications on top of this single sort of like structure, then work out ways in which you can pass these objects, the capital representations of capital, in a the closed gardens that exist on top of these platforms and the open ones. So, you know, if you look at what's happening right now, there is Quorum, which is, you know, the Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan like thing. There is Corda, which is the R3 thing. There is the China blockchain, there's the European blockchain, there's the UK, all of these different like initiatives that are all fundamentally going to lose, because all of these companies are famously bad at cooperating with each other, and all of these companies are famously bad at cooperating with each other. Is China going to accept the American blockchain standard? Probably America. So like, I think that ultimately we're going to see a large number of private instantiations, and they're going to get more and more sophisticated. But I do think long-term public decentralized infrastructure, that doesn't mean that there won't be like permission systems on top of that infrastructure for certain applications.
God, that's a fascinating answer, and I hope you're right. You know, I want the power to the people, the power to the user. That's what we're all about at Bondex. So I hope the public wins. That's the whole point of this, you know, blockchain revolution, right? Is to not have to rely on decentralized institutions, because, you know, if we get in their hands, we'll have things like 08 happen again, and that's not what we want. That's how this whole thing started, right? Listen, we're nearing the end of our interview. There's something that we like to do at the Bondex live stream, which is we like to take sort of just a barometer of the market feeling. So how do you feel we're doing in the bull market at the moment? When do you see it ending? What level of Bitcoin do you think is going to be coming in the near future? You know, basically give us your view on the market in the near term, near to medium term.
So like, obviously none of this is investment advice, and I don't advise anyone to buy off the back of anything that I say. These are just my opinions. I think that we're at the potential inflection point of a super cycle, and I think that inflection point's happening now, and it really depends whether or not institutional capital keeps buying these sort of like these periods of Bitcoin, buying the dips.
So what you're saying is we're able to maintain the resistance point and institutions keep buying, we could be at the beginning of a super cycle. So you see it going up a lot higher.
Yeah, potentially. I think like at least like I think there's a decent chance of it doubling from here. Beyond that, it really depends on what the macro environment does globally, and like if there is a recession, or you know, sort of or like hyperinflation in America or something like that, then what's likely to happen is your going to see, well, if there's a combination of recession and hyperinflation, you're going to see it be bad for Bitcoin, not good, because the institutional capital is risk-on capital in Bitcoin, and as soon as they see as soon as you start seeing capital outflows out of the institutional allocations, which you will do as a result of redemptions when people get spooked about the market, then you'll see sell-off Bitcoin, and that's going to pressure the market. And I think that's quite likely to be the end of this market, is basically significant negative economic sentiment, meaning that institutions have to down risk their capital allocations, which means they sell off Bitcoin, which means the end of it. So like, I think that or the end of this particular bull cycle, that's my view of what's likely to be the end. But like, I think that could continue for another 3 to 6 months if we manage to get through this next sort of like couple of months, which is going to be a bit rocky.
So you think that we could have a super cycle in the next 3 to 6 months, and then if there's a systematic risk of the general economy going down, then that would take the crypto space with itself, and that could happen within the next 6 months. That's your personal view.
So yeah, so like I think if we get through the next couple of months, we're likely to run for another 6 months at least. If then there's an bad economic turn, then we'll see the end of the super cycle. If there isn't, and we continue, then maybe we'll push on for another year. For me, like, it really depends on that combination of institutional capital appetite plus a good economic outlook globally for the next 6 months.
Yeah, I think the state of affairs right now is fragility. That's how I would describe it anyway. And, and I like your view a lot. Just to be clear, and this is because our viewers like it, you're saying if we hold at a similar level for the next 3 months there, we could be able to hold for another 6 for a total of like 9 months of more bull market, essentially.
That not precisely what I said, but I don't disagree with what you're saying. Like, sure, something around that. Like if we hold above 60 into January, I think it's problem with the economy, then we're likely to see a super cycle for the next 6 to 9 months beyond that. So towards the end of next year.
That would be fantastic, wouldn't it? I love that after all these live streams we're doing, it's going to be fun. We're doing 2 a week with people from all over the industry. And we make this question as the last question of every live stream. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens and who was the closest. So, we'll keep you posted on that. And thank you very much for joining. For everyone listening, join Bondex, join the Talent Revolution. And also, of course, check out Radix, which I think has got lots of interesting things going on, especially if you're a developer developing on DeFi. It seems like you need to be learning their language because that's the future of the programming language in DeFi in general. So you should be learning it. I'll be getting my team on Instapass.io tomorrow to be learning about that tool, which seems like a great way of KYC, AML, and to be ahead of the game on regulation. And thank you, Piers, for your time. It's been a pleasure to have you. And that's it for today. See you all in the next live stream.
Thank you very much, Ignacio. Lovely to meet you. Thank you.